Elçiler,
Distinguished ambassadors, esteemed participants, dear guests, after the protocol speeches, we are opening the first. The title is Security Concerns in the Region, Possible Areas of Cooperation. Now I would like to invite Mr. Ahmet Uysal, the moderator, Mr. Hasan Ahmadyan, Mr. Ziya Al-Asadi, and Mr. Mesut Özcan. I would like to invite you to the floor. This panel will last until 1 o'clock, and there will also be a Q&A session after the speech. Dear guests, you're all welcome once again. I am Ahmet Uysal, Director of ORSAM. Protests that have been fatal recently, and they might actually be having an impact on the course of the role of Iraq in the region, as well as the relations with Turkey and Iran in the Gulf. So Iraq is going through turbulent times. But before this, in our Middle Eastern Analysis journal, we had an article. Unending Wars of Iraq was the title. Unfortunately, since its establishment, Iraq has been fighting against wars. Aside from the last century, it's been a neighbor for the last millennium. It's our neighbor. We have economic and cultural and social ties, including Baghdad and other conventions and treaties. And as Turkey, Mr. Mesut Özcan will be delving into details, but we are not a country of oil, as Turkey, you know. We have industry, tourism, agriculture. So we're trying to live by our own means and develop by our own means. We want a stable neighbor relationship with Iraq, be it embargoes, crises, wars. They all have a negative impact on us. So we want the stability of the region, just like during Saddam period, there were the embargoes on Iraq, which were painstaking. It had big harm on the economy of Iraq as well as Turkey. And it had led to PKK rising in the southeastern Anatolian provinces. So it has a serious impact on bilateral relations. And the embargo that is applied to Iraq today, the sanctions, also have a negative impact on Turkey's economy. And also it has a negative impact on the trade relations with Iran on the eastern border. So it has been a negative aspect all in all. And there's also the terror issue. It's important in terms of security, but also in terms of humanitarian and social aspects. So there's a lot to debate on these. We'll be especially focusing on what kind of trilateral relationship that the three countries can develop in political and security concerns. These are critical issues, as you know. First comes life. So actually, God has given you food and has protected you from fear. So first, you have to eat and drink, and then security comes. The issue of security does not necessarily entail threat. What matters is perception. You might be fearing somebody else harming you. This is a problem in itself. So being secure and safe is as important as living, but of course it has a social aspect to it. If you ignore a whole society on behalf of security, then this is a vicious circle. Terrorist organizations can actually exploit this situation. So this is a complicated issue. And the views of the experts, their contributions, will be for a more healthy, a more reasonable solution. This is what we believe. First of all, of course, there are general questions that we ask here to the speakers. The parties shall take into consideration these questions, especially Iran, Iraq, Turkey. We will be listening to their views on priorities, concerns concerning political and security areas, and what kind of cooperation can we undertake. And the last notion I would like to underline is that after Arab Spring, there has been crises. And there has been efforts that have led to crises upon Arab Spring, and the countries have been weakened from war in Yemen to the role of Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Their roles have been weakened. We're not talking about the reasons why, but in the end, Turkey, Iran, and Iraq are countries that can come up with solutions that will contribute to the stability of the region in order to eliminate the chaotic situation in the region. So all these solutions, views, and opinions will have a serious contribution. This is our wish. So let's start with the representative of Iran, Mr. Hassan Ahmadian. He is assistant professor of Middle East and North Africa MENA studies at the University of Tehran. You have the floor, inshallah.
Thank you. I actually prepared my presentation in English, like I realized that I can speak Persian. Actually, I was thinking, should I speak in Arabic or English? But now that I can speak in Persian, I prefer to do that. Especially that I'm representing the Iranian view in this regard. I would first thank the IRAM for inviting me and setting this very important meeting up. And then I'll start my presentation in Persian if that's okay. من بحثم رو از یک چارچوب کلان شروع می‌کنم و بعد به مسائل می‌پردازم و در نهایت سعی می‌کنم به مسائلی که در واقع سوال‌های مطرح شده.
I would like to talk about the questions which are posed to answer those questions. The bigger picture is that in the United States does not have a clear policy in our region, and there are some contradictions retreating from the area and remaining in the area, increasing the forces in Iraq and Saudi Arabia shows the contradiction that shows in America's policy in the region. My ideology is that the United States has a Persian Gulf policies that the center is Iran. The United States is ready in order to jeopardize their interest, in order to put pressure on Iran. And this is a challenge for everybody. The sanction is a challenge for everybody. And the result of this policy is nothing that the center is Iran, is instability and more terrorism and more insecurity in the region. A part of this policy is because of the changes in the world's policy. We all know that we are walking in one pole into bilateral poles and many poles in the power of the world. the Iran strategic policy is that the Iran and the region is in their profit, so that we can have bipolar powers, as well as the cooperation of Iran with China and Russia is increasing in the face of America's power, which is and they have got sanctional policies which are one-sided. Multifaceted things in the face of history has got less importance in the history. This is the thing that the cooperation in the region has to be boosted, so that we can weaken the terrorist threats in the region, so that these things can be very useful for the region and for the countries in the region. That's why I think that these settings and conferences are very important for this phase, as well as for the other for the forthcoming time. The security of this region is very important for us. We are going to focus in the second session that how interconnectedness is very important for these countries. We cannot deny this interconnected is very important for us. We can say that this is very important for the policy, economy, and security of the society, as well as the internal security things are very important for each other countries. For example, Iran's security is important for Iraq's, as well as Turkey's for Iran. So it says that the interconnection says us that we have to cooperate with each other, so that we shouldn't do any harm to the interest of each other's national interests. That's why I think that is because we have to focus on the threats. The basic threats in the region is already the terrorism, and these threats are still in existence in the region, as well as in the world, for example, in Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, as well as the other countries. We also can see that these threats and terrorism is always facing these countries in the region especially. The second thing is that the one-sidedness of the sanction. This sanction did not only affect Turkey, but it also affected the relations between Iran, Iraq, and Turkey, as well as the other countries. And now it does not have effect only on Iran, but it also has effect on the trade relation between Iran, Iraq, as well as Iran and Turkey. That's why the sanction of Iran is a sanction of everyone in the region. That's why we should have a common policy in order to compete and stand against the one-sidedness of the policies. Iran has started a trend which is vanishing and removing Iran dollar from its business trading, which is already happening. And I think one of the that we can have in order in between our countries is to get rid of the supremacy of America's dollar in the trade dealing. The second aspect with the side of terrorism is focusing on interconnectedness of these three countries. We can see that Syria today has become a very topic that we should stay together and talk. After 2011, Syria has been a topic that everybody has to pay attention to. Iran and Syria after 2011 have been always working together in order to help each other and do cooperation. And this reduction of this terrorism in Syria has become a very good point for everybody in the region. I hope that the reinstruction or the rehabilitation in Iraq can be a very good point in order to cooperate. These countries cooperate with each other. The common profits for these countries, I'm going to talk about these in summary. We have to support the negotiation and the peace that I think that Iran and Turkey has to follow that. And try to bring KRG together with Baghdad and try to minimize the tensions in Iraq, which is in profit of all these countries. The sponsorship and support of peace in Iraq is something that we are all trying to bring. This is one of the basic fundamentals. The border security and as well fighting with terrorism and emphasizing on that is always important, and we should focus on that, and we should cooperate in order to bring security in the forces, in the borders. The re-infrastructure of Iraq, as well as cooperating in order to bring some projects. I hope these things will bring us together. The influence of Syria on security in the region, is the national security of these three countries, is also one of the important points that we should emphasize on. The importance of keeping the trade between these three countries is also a very pivotal negotiation point that will affect the other things. The reduction of this trade will have bad impact in these countries in the region. The challenges that we have in the region are a lot. The pressure of United States on the governments that are against their one-sidedness today is not unknown to anyone. This is a very big challenge for the country in the region, not for the region, but as well for the countries in the world. More than 28 countries currently are under the sanction of United States that show that United States is very one-sided. That shows that we've got a lot of importance in terms of historical things in the region. The things of trading in these three countries can show that the impact of the sanction of United States is getting less. In the region, some groups which are active and they're supported from the outside, which we have to think about. And I think that our main point is that the activities of these groups should be lessened and should be weakened. Heightenedness of the resilience in this region, for example, these three countries, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, have seen that the Iran's policy against the heighten of this resilience against the United States sanction has brought some challenges in Iran that has been controlled now, and we are trying to lessen the impact of the sanction that is done by United States in Iran. It looks like the economical experts say that we are trying to lessen the impact of the sanction that is done by United States in Iraq. We have got a compact of 5 points that I'm going to talk about them in summary, which I think is the answer for the question. First point, there was a point said that I think there's a theoretical discussion in international relation as well as security relation. In bigger picture, we should always try to start from the unimportant things in security, and we should go through the important points like high politics. We can see that in our region it is very clear that security in every region there is security challenges. We should focus on them. The high politics has got the most impact in the region. That's why focusing on this should be our priority against the other things. That's why focusing in these cooperation in these security issues and bigger picture is the preface of more cooperation between these countries. The security as well as focusing on terrorism, I think, can be the mechanism in order to bring these three countries together, which is the result of such conferences that in the bigger picture it can be a way in order to bring the think tanks together so that they can have conferences and come and talk about such issues. That's why I think that this vision should be prolonged in this country, and we should start from the bigger picture coming to small pictures. which I think the things which are the things like trade and security, which is getting bigger and more important, is something which I really appreciate. And I think security issue is very important. The second point, we should have a very common vision. We cannot finish all the problems at once. We cannot say that because we have this problem with this country, that's why we cannot cooperate in other aspects with these countries. That's why we should lessen our expectation. But I think that the security is bringing a lot of barriers, but we should try to work and be cooperative. One of the key issues that we can see here is the cooperation of Turkey and Iraq in the problem of Syria. Turkey and Iran have always been very cooperative in terms of solving the things in Syria. It shows the vision of these two countries against Syria in order to solve these problems and challenges between these three countries. The third country is that there is a wrong vision, there is a wrong thought, is the vision of competitiveness, that competitiveness or being rival between these two countries can be a profit to the other, which I think it's not true. This rivalry can become a cause of harm between these countries. This rivalry can be in anything. The coup in Turkey was against the things that we expected in Iran. The fight in the region is doing harm for all of us in these countries in the region. It does not matter wherever the fight or the war is. That's why we should have a solidarity, and the interconnectedness of these three countries become the cause that we cannot neglect these points. And we cannot say that this problem only exists in one, not in the other. The fourth point is that the security issues, along with the other issues, the trade relations should be always focused. As I said, in Iran there is a high hope in the cooperation of Iran and Turkey. The fifth point, which is the last, it is the discussion of international relation, that when we want to increase the cooperation, the countries shouldn't take out themselves from the challenges which exist in other countries. There are a lot of problems between these three countries. For example, the effort of Turkey that tried to bring a peace in order to bring peace in Iran. That was about 2010's nuclear agreement. It shows that it was very positive of Turkey's effort. We also can say that the other things, the problems that we have in Turkey, is also connected to Iran. So I think that the problems which exist among these countries are interconnected, and we should try to work together and find solution. And I hope that this conference will try to bring the closeness among these three countries. And I hope that in the near future we will have stability in Iraq, as well as the cooperation between Iran and Turkey is very important for the stability that can be found in Iraq. Thank you.
Teşekkürler Doktor Ahmet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rahmadyan. Perhaps I should have read your detailed CV. If to say, Mr. Ahmadyan, Dr. Ahmadyan is an academic at the University of Tehran. He held his PhD at the University of Tehran, Arabic. He knows Arabic, Persian, and English, Farsi and English, and has international relations, civic, military relations, Islamic movements in the Middle East as some of his focus areas. If only maybe Mr. Ahmadyan could have referred to specific issues concerning Turkey and Iran, and maybe in the Q&A session we can listen to the opportunities for cooperation between two countries. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now, our speaker is Mr. Ziya Al-Asadi.
Basra. He studied English language and literature in the University of Basra. After his graduation with BA, first rank among 90 students, he worked as a research assistant in the university for 3 years. He was appointed Minister of State in 2010. He is a former minister. In 2011, he was elected as a Secretary General of the Ahrar Bloc, and he's also he had the parliamentary bloc for the Ahrar group. And inshallah, he will talk about the Iraqi concerns and priorities in terms of security, cooperation, and other issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was asked to prepare my paper in English, but I'm going to seize the opportunity to speak in Arabic as well. First, I would like to thank IRAM for holding this timely and important workshop and gathering. I'd like also to thank all the esteemed audience, particularly Excellencies, Ambassador of the Republic of Iran in Turkey and Ambassador of the Republic of Iraq, for taking the pains and attending the session. I'm going to shift to Arabic now. Yeah.
Whatever is concerning the nature of the neighbors, Iran and Iraq, and Turkey on the other side, I will be very summing up. I'll be brief on some points that are major for the policymakers and all researchers for the cooperation between the three countries. The three countries have the same destiny in the same region. They are all always interacting with each other throughout their heritage and history, throughout occupation, throughout peer-to-peer relations. Some relations are integrating, but there is always a cultural and heritage and historical relations between the three countries. It overshadowed the communities and societies, and overshadowed and created the diversity of different communities inside of the region, and how old and authentic these societies are. I will divide my speech into 3 points. The first one is the policymakers. Whatever is produced by the think tanks or the academicians, analysts, or the research institutes or political institutes, they are being adopted by the political policymakers. That's why whenever there is always a research and analysis to these problems, there will always be a profit. The challenges are, in my point of view, it will be the main challenges are going to be spoken in English. The lack of coordination between the three countries is the first point. And the U.S., as my colleague mentioned earlier, the U.S. doesn't have a clear policy in the region, and the U.S. doesn't have a clear one, but it has a clear policy for the Middle East, and this policy is dependent on 4 points. First, Israel is a strong and an original ally of the U.S., both economically and politically. Protecting the second one is protecting the allies of the U.S. in the region, whether it is institutes, governments, taking care and protecting the energy resources in the region, because it's a very critical and vital region that is very important for the international relations and international affairs for the U.S. And there have been papers that have been published in the last 70s that specify that the Middle East region is very and extremely vital for the international relations for the U.S. And that happened with the Samuel Huntington's papers. He talked about the importance of the U.S. and the U.S. presence in the region and how much influence that it should have in the region. and the occupation, the U.S. presence in the is always described whether in the two as both in an invasion or having a military basis inside of the region, but this is also represented as a challenge for the stability. The second challenge is that the and the political agreements according everything between the three countries, specifically in the energy, water, or it doesn't have a regular an internationally decided guidelines to be agreed upon. The third challenge is the absence of the political frame and the security frame that is helping and vital to create the that are vital to create an NGO NGOs and civil society organizations that are helping in the society, and also the lack of the strategic vision with the policy decision makers. Turkey is not upfront about its will and decisions that it have for Iran or Iraq, and it has a certain uncertainty and unclearance between the relationships between the three countries is due to the lack of transparency. And the relationship between Iraq and Iran, for example, is most of the decisions are vague and ambiguous, and it lacks so much transparency, and this is a very major challenge in policy making and decision making. The lack of and non-existence of elements and organizations and institutions on a governmental level that is specified on to have a common law and to have a common system to take legitimacy from. And it doesn't have, there is no political analyst or research institutes that are governmentally backed in the regions, especially in Iraq. Not as it is in Turkey. You have in Iraq, there is always, it always exists that if there is a political studies institute that is working and it's not governmentally backed, it will always fail because it lacks the resources, and it doesn't have enough the financial resources, and it doesn't have the connections, it doesn't have the influence, and the government does not also it doesn't give an unlimited support to these private institutes, which are responsible and very important major player in and developing the cooperation between the three countries. There is always, and the fourth challenge is the lack of a common database between the four countries. The database that, for example, the water issue, the database that we're having right now is pretty hard. Iraq doesn't have enough database that, for example, Turkey has. It should be the same on the three sides because it's the same common issue between the three of them. As it is mentioned in English, we are not on the same page, and also this lack of information causes so much misdecision making in the decision making at the decision makers. There is always a very much lack of connection and regular meetings or annual or quarter and annual between these governments, and it doesn't talk. 5 minutes. That's why I will have to be much faster. From an Iraqi point of view, the political and security concerns, the political Iranian attitude towards Iraq is imposing and enforcing and dominant, which really hinders the relations and the mutual benefit between the two countries. And this I hear a lot from MPs, members of parliament, and others. There is so much difference and so much difference in perspective on the mutual benefit between the two countries. And this mutual benefit is always conflicting, and there is always a conflict of interest between those countries. And the lack of a common vision and common mission towards the international and regional challenges. I have two suggestions for that. We need, the first one is we need an immediate acting entities to be and cooperation to be able to work through committees to be able to face these challenges, but they are currently inactive. There should be an institute or a council that is including the three countries, and it goes on the executive and law and jurisdictional and combinational. These should have all this legitimacy and sources to work from, and to have the strong communication channels between the three countries. So, which will lead to let this committee to have a legal framework that it works under and through. Relating to the executive branch of it, there should be regular meetings that are held between the three countries to be able to communicate and discuss their mutual benefits and mutual interests. The three governments should have a common committee. It needs to include non-governmental organizations. It could have academic institutes, political institutes. It will be very important to revise all the political agreements that are held by the three countries, and to re-regulate it and to reinstitute it, to be able to normalize the relations currently between the three countries. And to have a very specified committees to create new laws, to create a new vision for the three countries. So this committee is going to review and to create these laws to be able to create and help the cooperation between the three governments. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't take so much time of you. I'm glad that you mentioned this. We don't have clear intentions towards each other, and Turkey wants to be transparent, and it wants to be direct, and it wants a secure neighbor, and it wants to have a trade relations. But the problem of Turkish presence with Ashikhan is targeting terrorism in these regions and lands, and it was being established under the U.S. pressure. It might be legal, but it needs to be rediscussed and reviewed, because it might not be helping the countries or the governments. But Turkey maybe entered this kind of coordination, but so we need to be able to truthfully discuss whether this was hurtful for Iraq or not. We have too much discussion about the militias and other security threats. That could be discussed later. This coordination will help the Iraqi citizen or not, and this discussion could be held after the suggestion from Dr. Mesut Özcan.
Marmara University, he studied political science relations there. He completed his master's in the same university, same department. During his doctoral studies, he was a visiting student at the St. Antony's College, Oxford University, with Jean Monnet Scholarship. He is currently a professor in Social Science University. He is also heading the Diplomacy Academy in the Foreign Ministry. The floor is yours, sir.
Çok teşekkürler.
Thanks very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Iranian Studies Center. At the beginning of my speech, continuously, they are bringing together academics from different countries and contributing a lot. I would like to thank Mr. Hakkı and the Iranian Studies Center. I talked about some similar topics in yesterday's closed sessions, but today, within the framework of those three titles, I'm going to talk about the Turkish relation with Iran and Iraq and its possible contributions to the regional security. I'm also going to talk about how to enhance the economic cooperation between those three countries. I'm going to share my individual views. First of all, I'm going to make some evaluations based on countries, Turkey's relations with Iran and Iraq, and then I'm going to bring about some conclusions. As you may have followed, in the region, there is a significant turmoil in the region. There is a significant transformation. After the Arabic insurgencies, there was a process that was not limited with the Northern Africa, and it found its various reflections in the Middle East. We're talking about a highly unstable region. We're talking about a region which has some serious security concerns. There are some severe economic development issues in that region. That's why there are some troubles, there are some protests and insurgencies. Within the framework of this general framework, let's talk about what kind of cooperation activities could be adopted on part of Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. First of all, among the priorities of those three countries, security is the most important. In terms of counter-terrorism, we need a cooperation, and this is among the country's priorities. When it comes to the combating terrorism, PKK, ISIS, and their derivative organizations should be paid attention to. And since the time being, we have been taking some steps towards that. If you pay attention to the Turkey's fight against PKK, for example, we can say that there has been a significant cooperation. Trans-border, cross-border operations have been conducted so far, but this did not bring a complete solution to our problems. That's why Turkey is continuing to conduct some cross-border operations in Syria and from Iran because of the PKK affiliated organizations, because of their penetration to Turkish border, there have been some problems. And what are we doing? It's possible to say that we are having some high-level contacts, as mentioned by our colleagues from Iran and Iraq. Within the framework of these high-level political dialogue mechanisms, there are some efforts to prevent this. As you may know, Turkey, both with Iran and Iraq, established high-level strategic cooperation councils, the purpose being that at the very high level, in the level of heads of the state and in the lower levels, we wanted to have such kind of topics debated at the table, and taking such kind of dialogues as an opportunity, parties are conveying their own problems and concerns to each other, but it's not possible to talk about that. It's not possible to say that PKK is ISIS and ISIS are totally terminated, and they are having a significant impact on the relationship between those countries. And we have to talk about the economic topics as well, apart from the political problems. And there were some questions asked to us by Iranian Studies Center, İRAM. They asked us to talk about what kind of activities could be taken in order to enhance the cooperation. At the beginning, as Mr. Ahmed said, Turkey is importing significant amounts of energy from Iran and Iraq. In the economic relations of Turkey with Iran and Iraq, energy dimension, oil and natural gas are playing a very important role. When it comes to the relations with Iran, in 2018-2019, 16% of the natural gas that is being consumed in Turkey is being bought from Iran. Since 2001, there is a significant amount of natural gas flowing into Turkey, and it is consisting 16%. But since 2019, because of the American sanction, Tüpraş has been unable to buy natural gas from Iran, and there was a significant decrease. But there was a trade volume of $15 billion, but in a couple of years, recent years, there was a significant decrease because of the American blockade. The Turkish companies experienced a reduction in the purchases and sales. There are some bilateral commercial issues, and they are the most important topics of the economic cooperation. In order to render the economic cooperation more effective, we have this optional trade agreement. There were some negotiations going on, and some points were agreed upon, but it's not possible to say that this optional trade agreement was completed in a satisfactory way. It's possible to say that there are some certain steps that could be taken in order to enhance the regional economic cooperation. Another topic, it has something to do with the security, but it has also some connections with the climate change. I'm talking about the refugee and migration problem. Refugee problem is having a significant impact on the relations between Turkey and Iran. Stemming from Afghanistan and Pakistan, there is a significant flow of migrants via Iran to Turkey. Some of them wants to go to Europe, and some of them wants to remain in Turkey. In 2017, we see that 175,000 people came from Iran. In 2018, this was 250,000, and when you look at the 2019 numbers at the end of the October, we can say that approximately 350,000 people came to Turkey via Iran, and they have been seized because of the economic problems in Iran, because of some other problems in Afghanistan and Pakistan. There is a significant amount of migrant flows. It is not only having an impact on our relations, but on the intra-European relations as well. When it comes to this security, it's not only about combating terrorism, but it has something to do with the humanitarian aspect of the security. And this is emerging as a new topic in our bilateral and trilateral relations. There are also some other topics, like the future of Syria or problems in Middle East general. There are some disputes and there are some agreements. And when it comes to the Syria, thanks to Astana process, there were increased contacts where where the governments wanted to overcome their differences. There is a political dialogue basis or ground between Turkey and Iran. The mutual contacts are going on. The optional trade agreement is still being negotiated. Majority of the economic collaboration is focused on the energy, though. But there are lots of steps that could be taken. When it comes to the Turkey-Iraq relations, the bilateral political dialogue mechanisms are revived thanks to this high-level strategic cooperation council. We know that there are some certain contacts, and in this year, starting from the heads of the governments down to the lower echelons of the bureaucracy, there were various contacts, and it's possible to say that there is a basis for dialogue. But on the other hand, within the framework of this panel, the topic of security has been at the top of the agenda of the Turkey-Iraq relations. The PKK's presence, combating against PKK, have been a topic between Turkey and Iraq since 1980s. When there are increasing security concerns, there is a significant impact on the Turkey-Iraq relations, especially in Kandil Mountain, in Sinjar and Mahmur. There has been a significant presence of the terrorists. This is a continuous concern. In order to manage this and in order to eliminate the PKK presence, Turkey has been conducting cross-border operations. 7th article of the Iraqi constitution prevents the use of the Iraqi territory by the terrorist elements. This forms the basis of the cross-border operations and cooperation between the two countries. The rise of the ISIS, the security concerns brought in our agenda by the rise of ISIS have been a significant topic of negotiation between the two countries, and it is one of the top topics, hot topics. Your last 5 minutes. No, it's according to my watch, it is 9 minutes 28 seconds. I have my own watch here. No, I know that it is 9 minutes, but I was concerned that you would be over time. Look at mine, it's saying 5 minutes. No, you said 20 minutes. No, my calculation was it was going to be 20 minutes. Okay, I'm going to observe the time. No worries. From an economic point of view, in the Turkey-Iraq relations, apart from the security concerns, economy has been playing a very important role. Iraq is a significant economic partner for Turkey. Together with the Kirkuk-Yumurtalık pipeline construction since 1977, buying oil from Iraq. During the Iran-Iraq war, pipeline was still active, but together with the rise of the ISIS, there has been some problems in the operation of those pipelines. Unfortunately, this is not in use. This is an inactive line, but still, Turkey has been importing significant amounts of energy from Iraq. This line is passing through northern Iraq, and to the 2018 numbers, it's possible to say that the volume of trade is around $13 billion. Energy import and export is playing a very important role, but Turkey is also exporting a significant amount to Iraq. So for now, Iraq is the number 4 commercial partner of Turkey. That's why this economic relation is very important. Iraq's restructuring emerged as a new field of cooperation. In 2018, there was a donors conference in Kuwait. And according to this in this conference, Turkey clearly expressed its willingness to play an active role in the reconstruction of Iraq. The negotiations, the contacts, in such kind of contacts, we are always raising this topic of cooperation. In terms of the reconstruction of Iraq, Turkey issued a series of projects, and it's not only limited with a certain region of Iraq, from Baghdad to Mosul. The purpose of Turkey is to reactivate the daily life in Iraq by establishing the infrastructures, highways, ports, airports. The plan is to revive the economic activities in Iran. There is a significant effort, and it's possible to say that there is a significant ground for negotiation. Within the framework of the Turkey's project, we know that there have been a series of investments, but the biggest problem that prevents us from taking the necessary steps has been the demonstrations. And in terms of realizing the projects, there were some lack of communication with the interlocutors, be it the airport in Mosul, in Basra. There were some projects to revive the seaports. It's possible to overcome such kind of problems by increasing the number of contacts. Another topic was to open another border gate, another customs gate. It is going to play a significant role in increasing the commercial opportunities for both countries. And finally, water has been the hot topic in yesterday's discussions and today's discussions. Since the last year, there has been demonstrations going on in Basra. The water topic has been at the agenda in Turkey-Iraq relations. Regarding the Ilısu Dam's reservoirs, there were some negotiations, and Turkey postponed the process of keeping more water in Ilısu Dam. By postponing this process, Turkey tried to take some further steps in order to satisfy the Iraqi counterparts. To be able to take further steps in establishing the necessary infrastructure and to use the water resources more effectively, our Minister of Forestry and Water Affairs, Veysel Erol, visited the Iraqi government in 2009, July. From the president to the other officials of the Iraqi government, they have paid some visits. Necessary infrastructure couldn't be built. Water regulation, and they have made some efforts in order to increase the collaboration between the two countries. And it was not only limited with the July visit. There were some also visitors from Iraqi government to Turkey. And in the coming period, this is going to be one of the hot topics. This is what we are going to see. We will continue the mutual negotiations to improve the water situation, but Turkey is closely monitoring the demonstrations in Iraq, and Turkmens in Iraq are an important Turkish concern. Their representation in the central government and in the Kurdistan regional administration have been important topics of debate. As a wrap-up in the last 3 minutes, political cooperation, security cooperation, counterterrorism cooperation, what kind of mechanisms can we have? We can say that there are some certain mechanisms in play, though usually they are bilateral. We have the high-level strategic cooperation councils, which enables us to conduct our political dialogue. On the other hand, we need to disseminate, we need to expand the scope of this cooperation. Such kind of events should be sustainable to render our cooperation more strong. Middle Eastern region is a region which is open to the influences of the external actors. Most of the time they're involved and they're trying to shape the events, shape the course of events. But the countries of the region should pay attention to their own interests and collaborate further. There are some mechanisms in place, but unfortunately they cannot be made functional. On some topics there are mechanisms in place, but the political ownership is not very well advanced. Because of the conditions in Iraq, the government couldn't be formed. After the formation of the government, there were some political sections distributed in various ministries, which created an inharmonious or unharmonious structure within the Iraqi government. Fortunately, these are among the obstacles that prevent us from further collaboration. Lack of trust is another factor that prevents us, but lack of trust could only be overcome through collaboration. When we take concrete steps, tangible steps for collaboration, we can overcome the lack of trust issue. Unfortunately, the Middle East is not presenting a bright picture. Yes, there are resources in the Middle East, but there are significant problems in using them effectively. If you have high youth unemployment, if you fail in using the resources effectively, then such kind of demonstrations would be inevitable. We need political ownership from the region. alternative energy resources are increasing. We have lots of resources, but if we fail in using them effectively, if we fail in bringing economic development, we will continue to see some significant troubles. And I have still 5 seconds, but I would like to end my speech here. Maybe we were a little bit late, that's why we wanted to take the time down to 15 minutes, but our professor was extremely democratic, and maybe because of the rising demonstrations in the Middle East, he was also somewhat protesting. We have a couple of minutes for the discussion. We may have stolen some time from their speech, but they can use their time when answering your questions. Many refugees were escaping from ISIS. They came to Turkey, and some groups, some militias, were presented as members of ISIS, and unnecessarily they were afraid because of this, because of their far connections with ISIS, like some relative was a member of ISIS, but then they became suspicious individuals and they didn't want to go back. This was another important topic. Water topic, dams are important issues. Maybe we need to go into the details, but our friends from Iraq are extremely sensitive towards this topic, but it is a misplaced concern. Turkey wants to reserve this water for electricity production purposes, and during the summer we are releasing the water, and during the summer nobody can easily find water. Despite the fact that Ilısu dam was constructed, we still postpone the regulation of water. During the summer, there was a significant precipitation last year, but unfortunately, nowadays, because of the God's willing, we couldn't see any rain. I wish last year we have seen enough amount of water so we wouldn't have such kind of concerns. Another topic. There is an aim, there is an objective to start a new customs gate, and this will enhance the economic cooperation in the region. Iraqi government and Turkish government wants to have this, but America, United States and Iran, they are resisting against this, maybe because of this competition with Turkey. Please introduce yourselves when you're asking a question, and please ask concise questions as much as possible, and address your question to certain individuals.
My name is Şebnem Udum, Associate Professor at Hacettepe University's International Relations Department. First of all, thank you very much for this organization, and my question is to the entire panel. I would like to first start with thanking Dr. El-Ashadi for his emphasis actually on what we call functionalism in international relations theory. He basically touched upon this problem that we should start first with basic and technical or functional issues to proceed for cooperation. I have a short comment and a question for the entire panel. Actually, to initiate these kinds of cooperations and to make them long-lasting, we need to first agree on the principles, and then we need to devise, write down the rules, and then decision-making procedures. Then we can have our norms. And here, I would like to ask the panel, as Professor Özcan mentioned, there is an absence of trust. What I see is, and what Dr. Ashadi touched upon, are two things. The first thing is that these three regional countries have their own background of history and culture and civilization. So they have a problem with including extra-regional actors. And second, if I'm not wrong, you mentioned about the role of language. So my question is, how can we really surpass this or overcome this absence of trust between these three countries, and what are the sources of this distrust? Although we are situated in the same region, and if there would be a common language other than English, what should it be? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a couple of more questions. Anybody else? Okay, yes.
Ahmet Kadir Ali from Gazi University. I'm doing a PhD in the Radio, Cinema and TV department. I'm going to ask a question to our dear Professor Al-Saidi. You talked about the American defense strategy in the Middle East. They are trying to defend Israeli and other allies. Why did you distinguish Israel from the other allies? Is it because of the religious tendency? Is it because of the religion in Israel that United States is attaching further importance to Israel? Mr. Ahmet Uysal talked about that. Iran does not want to have another customs gate, border gate between Turkey and Iraq. Is it because of some external influence, or is it the fact that Iraq Kurdistan region administrators are also preventing such a development?
Effort. I present the donor conference in Kuwait, and all of us encourage the position of the Turkey pledging with $30 billion. What? Sorry. But till now, there is no settlement for any project, for any amount of money spent inside Iraq in investment. I think this pushes us to raise the fears about this position. Always Turkish government connect between the political position and security position and its movement in the economic ground. Mosul problem, Kirkuk problem, and security in the border with this tendency. I think when we want to go forward in our relation between Iraq and Turkish, we must start with the economy. And that's very important, although we have a big amount of trade between countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I think 3 questions would be enough. Just a follow-up on the question. I noticed the same in Iran. When I visit Iran, Iranian official says, please help us to promote Turkish tourism, or Turkish tourists visit Iran. I said, this is your duty. Of course, we want to help, but every country trying to attract investment or tourists or from other countries. But we also know that there is some Iranian government sometimes try to discourage the visitors. Yes. I'll come to that. But yeah, the same for Iraq. We try to honestly, as the Orsam Center, we try to present a positive view of Iraq. not, we visit Baghdad, we visit Karbala, we visit Erbil. We try to show that it's more stable than it is depicted. But it is also, Iraq's duty to promote this idea that it is an investable place, it is a visitable place. Iraq has a lot of cultural heritage in the north, in the south. In Baghdad, we have Abu Hanifa, Imam Azam, and we have a good tradition also, Ottoman monuments. And a lot can be done, but everybody try to promote his own position. Yes, one more question there. Go ahead.
Merhabalar, ismim Ceyhan.
Hello, my name is Ceyhan, Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University economy student. First of all, I would like to thank İRAM for this conference. My question has to do with Iran and Iraq. There are serious protests going on, public insurgencies, and for the speakers, can these protests evolve into a change in the regime? The Secretary of State in the United States have declared that he is supporting the protesters. If this turns into a change in regime, how would it have an impact on the interests in the region? Thank you very much. If any further questions, then we can continue.
If you want to respond and...
Thank you. I'll start with the question on the mistrust between the countries in the region. I think it has to do a lot with history, with the perception, historical collective memory, but also it has a lot to do with competition between these countries. Competition, as our chairperson has rightly put it, countries seek their own interests. Now, what we are doing here is to bring together what we can bring together to work on collectively. Now, we know that it's impossible to come to a singular agenda between all of the countries, but we have to try to enhance the ties. And I think the previous, the recent history of Iran-Turkey cooperation, Turkey-Iraq cooperation, Iran-Iraq cooperation are quite telling as to how can we evolve from this stage to build more trust. I think the high politics, as I mentioned in my presentation, has also a lot to do with the mistrust. We are not addressing this as adequately as we should. I think we have to emphasize on this more and more. Turkey, as we listened, has a lot of security concerns that I think should be taken seriously by Iraq and Iran. Iran as well has a lot of security concerns that should be taken into consideration. And I think that's an issue that underpins lots of the insecurities. Now, I know the functionality of the relationship can spill over to other areas, but I think security is a part of every sphere of, or every field of cooperation between these three countries. That's why security is the major, the dominant. It is unfortunate, but it is what it is. We have to tackle it as it is. For the second question, I believe, Iran is under maximum pressure. The United States love to see Iran fall apart. It has been wishing for that for 4 decades. It couldn't achieve it. And I don't think this administration, with its lack of understanding of the dynamics in Iran and in our region, is in a place to impose that. I mean, previous administrations at least had a more nuanced, more understanding of the Iranian situation internally and regionally. But this administration, I believe, lacks that as well, and it's more provoking, trying to provoke anti-Iranianism in the region and anti-Iran propaganda all over the region. And within Iran, it is a stated goal. It wants uprising to topple the establishment. But Iran, I think we should take that into account, that under this immense pressure, Iran embarked on this resilience-aimed policy of fuel hike, which is really, it takes courage to do that under this pressure. But I think it was successful, and I think Iran has passed the challenge that it faced afterwards. And I think it helps a lot with the resilience, the economic resilience of Iran vis-à-vis the United States and its maximum pressure. The next year's Iran budget is, as you might have heard, is free of oil. So this is part of it, actually. This resilience policy of the administration is part of a free oil budget for next year in Iran. That's it.
Thank you very much. I have 3 questions I need to address, very important, about the failure of interaction or the difficulty of interaction between the 3 main countries in the region, and whether this interaction is going to be successful or not. I mean, given the idea of communication as such, I mean, using verbal communication, I think there are extra-linguistics and non-verbal means of communication. The 3 cultures have been interacting since long time in history. And there were 3 empires: the Islamic Empire that started from Iraq as its place where it disseminated to the whole world, and then there is the Ottoman Empire and the Sassanid Empire. Each empire has left very deep influence in each culture, in each society. And there are shared and common cultural clues and cultural codes that can help each country understand one another. I mean, I have many examples, but I think what is there in these 3 cultures is essential for the understanding of how policies can be drafted and designed. And language shouldn't be a barrier in this case. I mean, if we consider the misunderstanding or the lack of transparency as a result of the lack of a common language, I think we are mistaken. The problem is not because we don't speak the same language, we cannot understand one another. I think because we need to have a common vision, we need to have a common worldview concerning the major issues, concerning the general issues that are very much important to each and every single country in the region. The lack of having one vision, one worldview is the reason behind the lack of understanding, not because we don't speak the same language. We do have common assets, common foundations on which we can build that other countries might lack. I mean, the case in Iraq is very unique. Iraq is well placed to understand Iran and to understand Turkey, maybe better than Saudi Arabia and better than Oman and any other countries, because the geographic area of Iraq, the geographic location, and the cultural position and the status enables Iraq, both enable Iraq to be understanding or understood, to understand and to be understood by both countries. So language should never be a barrier. There is a goodwill, there is an intention, decision makers are willing to overcome the difficulties and obstacles, then I think there will be solutions. As far as the question about Israel, well, I think I'm a person who believes in science. What can be verified should be considered as a scientific fact. If we refer to the books written by Americans themselves, I mean, I can mention names here: Edward Said, Noam Chomsky, and all the critical persons of the American foreign policy. They will tell you that any American administration, they prioritize or they put at the top of their priorities the safety and well-being of Israel as the first point when it comes to their foreign policy in the Middle East. Then comes the safety and well-being of other allies. Other allies are important, but I mean, Israel is the most important country. And an explanation of this is the necessity or the need for any American president, even before the election, to go to assure the Israeli community that his program is going to match at least their expectations and their aspirations. So I mean, this is no secret. America is concerned about the safety and well-being of Israel, and its foreign policy is designed to suit these concerns. So these 3 countries, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, should understand this fact, and America is here not because they like the region, not because their interest mainly in the energy and other sectors, no, because there are other political issues here. And we have to design our foreign policy in a way that is compatible with the challenges that are existing, and one of the challenges is the existence, the physical and the non-physical existence of the United States. The other question about, there's the third question about the serious protests in Iraq and whether they are going to be affecting the upcoming regime or whether they are going to change the whole system. I mean, no matter whether the coming system is going to be a parliamentary system or a presidential system, we have just been talking about the necessity of establishing boards and councils and committees that are composed of all the branches, all the authorities, the legislative, the executive, and the legal branches, that can draft plans, mutual plans, trilateral plans that will benefit the interests of the three countries. So if the governments change, then the policies should be in place. They should not be changed. If the persons who are at the top of the authority go, then we have to work with the institutions themselves. We shouldn't concentrate on the persons, on the people. And I think this is one of the mistakes that Turkey unfortunately made early in 2006 or 2007. They thought that backing or supporting some people in Iraq will guarantee the policies that will work with. I mean, we understand this. We understand the concerns and fears of every neighboring country that any Iraqi government that should be established should serve at least their interests in Iraq. But this is not going to be at the expense or at the expense of the Iraqi interest. Now, it is better for countries to work with institutions rather than people, to work with institutions rather than parties in Iraq, to work with the government, the official government, no matter what kind of government is, better than working with particular communities or parties or parts of the Iraqi community. And this is going to be solid, this is going to be viable, and this is going to be reliable for a better future of understanding and mutual cooperation between the three countries. I hope I answered these three questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Özcan.
Regarding the question of lack of trust and also the neo-functionalist approach, unfortunately, we have a lack of trust here, and this is preventing more cooperation. And if we compare the conditions in the ground in the Middle East with the conditions in post-World War II Europe, maybe why we have such still lack of trust, maybe we didn't experience that much devastation, maybe. We had lots of problems in the region. We had many challenges, but unfortunately, we couldn't overcome this trust issue among us. And this is preventing us to go beyond some rhetorical words. And definitely, there is a need for all of us to come together to address the issues. But on the other hand, there are some initiatives, there are some mechanisms, but on the other hand, the questions that we are facing in the region are very huge, very daunting, and we have to address these in a regional way. But on the other hand, despite some functional cooperation, there is still some room to maneuver more, to go beyond these, let's say, existing schemes. But on the other hand, still, we have some disagreements, maybe some historical reasons, some competition among different players. But on the other hand, this is negatively affecting all of us. On the issue of Kuwait conference and also the reconstruction in Iraq, I should say Turkey, as I said during my presentation, Turkey presented some programs, some, let's say, projects. But on the other hand, I should say, on the side of Iraqi authorities, there are some delays and there are some difference of opinion, because in terms of, for example, the airport in Mosul, if we talk about some projects, if we talk about some ports in Qasr in Basra, or if we are talking about some hospitals, there are some difference of opinions among different Iraqi actors. Who is responsible for these projects? Who are making the decisions? And then, it's also related with your remarks, definitely it is obvious that you should talk to the authorities, you should talk to the institutions. But on the other hand, there are different groups, and if you talk to some let's say, minister, then you may hear they are not their responsibility, someone else is doing this. Or if you deal with this, then you realize there are some others intervening to this process, and all the time these are delayed. If there are some, let's say, counterparts, then these projects are improving and going well. As a result, for example, in terms of the rebuilding of Mosul, for example, now Turkey is building one of the bridges, bringing two sides of Mosul, the number 4, bridge number 4. And on the other hand, in terms of building the airports in Kirkuk and also in Mosul, there are some projects already, and these are very detailed projects. These were all delivered to the Iraqi side and waiting the answer. So I understand the reconstruction of Iraq is delaying, but on the other hand, it's, in my understanding, it's also very much related with the organizational structure within Iraqi political and administrative system.
Thank you, Doctor. We have 1 or 2 minutes. If you have anything urgent that you cannot leave without asking, Ustaz Safir, تفضل.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much for all our presenters and panelists and Ahmed. And it's my own duty to clarify some points after being risen up in the problem between the relationship between Iraq and Turkey in the first place. Considering it, thank you again. I find myself I have to explain some facts to our presenters and our audience. I have benefited a lot from my attendance, and as I am the ambassador here in Turkey, I have to clarify some points and aspects in the relationship between Iraq and Iran. You know that our relationship between Turkey and Iraq is very important and very critical, and we're working on developing it and strengthening it all the time. And as a diplomat, and all the diplomatical side is working on developing it, and we are working on the differences and our to work through our differences, but we need to keep the conversation channels open. For the trade relations between the two countries, we had a trade size of $12 billion. And during our president visit to Turkey in 2017, we are working on expanding this trade size to trade volume into 20 billion. And we are having 50 billion as a gift that is coming to Iraq, and we are having $5 billion that are coming to Iraq also to help with rebuilding and reconstructing Iraq. But we still have some hindrances and handicaps in the democratic process, but we're working on this topic to find the best way to reuse the Turkish money. We have very much different challenges inside of Iraq, and it should be respected and should be taken in consideration. And it will help Iraq to stand on its feet and to be able to have some of its promises and keep some of its promises. And for the economical balance between the two countries, and 90% of this trade volume is for Turkey, because most of the trade. We have to strengthen the Iraqi economy and to improve and work on the development and economical development inside of Iraq. And it's not just about the trade volume, it's about how much investments are being put in it. And we are here in Turkey. We are working on improving and developing on this trade balance and the trade wage volumes. We are trying to balance it between the two countries. and all we do right now is exporting oil. And I would love if this to be taken in consideration. And for the water issue, it's a very much sensitive topic to be discussed. And as I pointed earlier, the water relation between the two people is not just technical or experimental. It's not only about projects or channels or dams. It's more differently for Iraq, and as Iraq is a country that its culture was based or built on the river. It is a very important and historical claim for Iraq. And by the end of the 70s and 80s, there is a gradual control of the sources of the rivers, and there is a justified fear of these control, and we want to understand it. Is it relevant to Turkey, or is it relevant to Iran? We have the same trouble with Iran, but we are not. It's not to be being discussed currently, considering that the Tigris and the Euphrates are the main issues and the main care of the Iraqi citizen. We are willing to create a framework between the two countries that recognizes both the rights of both countries and on equal grounds, and puts the countries pair to pair. We are willing cooperation and collaboration. We are looking forward for cooperation and coordination in projects, in everything. But the framework that is happening after this, we are looking forward to have an agreement, a long-term agreement with Turkey to recognize the rights of both the Turkish and the Iraqi side in the water. I'm not an ambassador in Iran, but with the water resources, the same thing happened from the 80s till now. There was projects and programs that were implemented inside of Iran, and there is no the Tigris River that is inside of Iran that doesn't have a dam, and this Turkish and Irani dams never been like the Iraq has never been taken in consideration. Why it haven't been inside of the agreements? Why didn't happen? We have the similar culture, we have the same economy, we have the same destiny, we have the same privileges and mutual benefits in this point and in this issue and in these rivers and this water. Why don't we talk? We cannot hurt a neighboring country. We cannot hurt this. And I have said this earlier to the Irani delegate to Iraq when I was in Iraq in the Abadi's government. We know in Iraq that Iran is facing a lot of troubles from desertation and vapor and pollution. I have proposed this problem with Turkey and Iraq and Iran, but we cannot have an absolute control over water. But we have to achieve the mutual benefit. We have to take in consideration others' benefits. We are a downstream country. We have to take all the others in consideration. We have to. We are just a downstream. We don't know how how the dams proceed. We don't know how it works. We only have two agriculture seasons that we're working, and for agriculture we are very much dependent on that. And if our northern or eastern neighbor doesn't know this, that will create a huge issue for us currently. When we are facing the terror and we're facing the other challenges, we have a same destiny. Why we are not discussing these issues and to have a better understanding to it? And the whole point of discussion and talking and conversation is to be able to face and to improve on these contradictions. There is a very specific point that I want to clarify between the relationship between Iraq and Turkey. In the 26th and the 27th, 2006 and 2007, the relationship was mostly based on the economical side and on the political side, but like, as Turkey doesn't have a certain or specific ideology that it is trying to present or trying to promote, and there was an expected visit of President Erdogan inside of Iraq, but now it has been postponed till the end of the year, and there is a real improvement in the relationships between both Iraq and Turkey, and there is way much more could be said in this topic in my meetings with the guest country, with the hosting country, and the doors are open to understand this, and there is a positive reaction. Within the the Iraqi-Irani relations, we have a very complicated relationships. In Iraq, we understand and we appreciate Iran's position and situation on our side to fight the terrorism and to achieve our own goals. But however great things and however much great things that happened to us, we are looking at the past. We need to look into the future. We need to look with our relationship with Iran to look at this relation in a peer-to-peer basis. This relationship has to be balanced. We should look into the future for that, and the experts and academicians should work on this and work to develop this. And there is a lot of things that are demonstrations and protests that are happening in the street that are looking forward to this kind of cooperation. And Iraq is currently paying so much of a price the price that we have to consider the consideration back from Iran in this relationship has been too much. And thank you very much for sorry for prolongating, and thank you very much for listening to me.
What's going to happen? The developments and protests, etc., the future of Iraq and the shape of political system and economic system will affect the relations with Iran and with Turkey. So the big question, where Iraq is going to go after this? I mean, this new government, new constitution, and many unknown, many question marks still remains. And hope the best for Iraq, because we need a strong, stable Iraq. And also with for example, the growing season or agricultural season, you said is different from Turkey. And you mentioned about the trade gap between the two sides. I mean, Turkey also consume a lot of vegetables and stuff in winter, and we don't normally use, I mean, greenhouse or this artificial growing in a way. I mean, if Iraq produce, we can, also import a lot from, even food from Iraq. So, I mean, many things can be worked out in terms of economy, security, and other issues. And I hope that it was a useful discussion by the panelists and with the questions and comments. And I appreciate the contributions by the participants, also by the presenters and by participants. Now it's the lunchtime, the 15th floor, and Dr. Ismail is going to remind us what's
Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much.
Katılımlar için
I would like to thank Mr. Hasan Ahmadian, Mr. Ziya Al-Asadi, and Mr. Mesut Özcan for their presentations. Now we have lunch break. We will proceed at 2 o'clock.
From 2 p.m. We are back at 2 p.m. again.